my sense of worthiness is my sense of I am enough, and my humanness is enough. That I am sufficient, who I am and where I am right now in this moment. And I get to improve because I am worthy of improvement and because I choose to improve. So
Beautiful.
it's not about coming from a deficit.
There's something wrong with me. I need to
There's something
change.
wrong with me. I need to change. I need to fix myself. I'm not broken.
Right.
I'm not broken.
Welcome to the Coaching Studio. I'm your host, Lyssa deHart. And today I am super happy to introduce someone I met a few years ago on Clubhouse when that was a thing, Dr. Frederick Sanders. He is a MCC with the International Coaching Federation. He goes by Freddie with his friends. And Freddie is an international divinity coach, a recent recipient of the and gold winner of the Best Executive Coach in October of 2023. He brings a wealth of experience from his work in organizations like Lyra Health, Better Up, Coaching Hub, and the Vision Investment. He is also an academic, having completed his master's and doctorate in professional coaching and human development at the International University of Professional Studies in December of 2022. What truly sets Freddie apart is his dedication to fostering growth and empowerment of high impact men of color across the globe. His work is fueled by a passionate commitment to cultivate a world where integrity, agency, freedom are not just ideals, but lived experiences for all. Join us as we discuss his journey, insights, and the impact of his work in the world. Welcome to the show, Freddie. I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you for having me, Liz. I'm super excited for this conversation.
I am as well. So I would love, I'm always really fascinated about the journey that a person has taken that ends up where you and I are having this conversation right now. And
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about, there are two really epic journeys that are just sort of in your credentials, right? The MCC, which is a journey in and of itself. And then there's the doctoral work that you've done, which is its own unique brand of intense journey. And I
Mhm.
would really love to sort of see like what was the thing that sort of put you on the path that has led you to where you are today?
Yeah. That's a great question. Um, so my journey, so I was a graphic designer before becoming a coach. I did graphic design for about 17 years. And so I've always been a creative. I've always enjoyed, like, one of my core values is my creativity. Um, and when I got to a point in that career domain where I felt like I, I was honestly, I was just kind of over it. I didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to do something else, and I wanted to do something that would still allow me to be creative, but have a more profound impact in the world and in people's lives. Um, so that led me to, so there was a friend of mine who, and this was in the summer of 2018. At that time, he was completing his certification as a coach. And we encountered each other at a mutual friend's 4th of July barbecue. And I overheard him talking to another friend about this program that he was about to graduate from. And it was at that time that I was, considering a career transition away from graphic design. And, of course, his conversation piqued my interest. So I just kind of parked myself and started listening.
And
Long story
bridled up.
short, yeah. Longer story short, he and I had several conversations after that event that led me to enrolling into the same school that he did. The school is Ideal Coaching Global, uh, which is a school that specializes in ontological coaching. And honestly, that school was the catalyst. I started that program in January of 2019, and that was a 9-month program. That was the catalyst that set me on the path of, to where I am now.
Who
Yeah.
knew a barbecue could be, I mean, I know how important barbecues are in general, just because I love them when I go to them, but who knew it could be so pivotal in the respect of like overhearing a conversation and that sets a new course on your work? You know, and it's sort of interesting, something that you said earlier, which is that you're really a creative type. But if I'm hearing you correctly, even as a graphic designer and artist, that if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, at some point there's an opportunity to be ready to ask a different question, have a different creative outlet, and really discover yourself in new ways. And it sounds like that's sort of what happened
Yeah.
through that program.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it ignited this fire and this hunger for learning that and actually it re I relearned learning itself through that program
What did
because,
you discover is your relearning learning?
well, it took me back to my previous academic education where it was all about getting grades. It wasn't about actually learning, it was about getting to an outcome.
Performative.
And so this had me to rethink about the process of learning in such a way that it's about embodiment, that it's about integration, it's about applied, because people say all the time, the cliche, knowledge is power. I say knowledge is potential power. It's
Ding,
what
ding,
we,
ding.
yeah, it's what we embody, it's what we practice that that's our power. That's where we find our power. So yeah, that program just had me really, because it wasn't just a certification to become a coach. It was a very heuristic exploration that had me really, dig even more deeply into myself and into my own, deep inner work journey than I had previously done before I went into the school.
And I'm curious really how that internal exploration of your own being, and how, and even this realignment of your ideas about what the performative nature of what academics had been to this more experiential, if I'm hearing you correctly,
Mhm.
experiential learning, how
Yes.
that then impacted your desire to go on and complete a master's and doctoral program. And I'm going to stop there, but I would love to hear sort of that also.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, that was everything. That program shifted everything for me because before that, I completed uh, my undergrad degree in 2002.
Mhm.
After that was done, I was like, I'm done with school. I'm over it. I don't, yeah, let's start making some money here. So after that, I wasn't really interested in anybody's postgraduate anything. Um, but when I completed Ideal Coaching Global's Coaching for Excellence program, um, and actually started working as a full-time coach. So Lyra Health was the first company that I was hired with after I graduated. Um, I learned from one of my cohorts with Lyra that there was a doctoral program specifically in coaching, professional coaching and human development. And I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like I know that there are doctorates in coaching adjacent fields like organizational leadership and things like that. But I had never heard of a doctorate specifically in coaching, and it's like my eyes lit up. Everything in me, was energized at that point because I was like, I want that, you know. And my mentor that I was assigned when I enrolled into the school, one of the first things he asked me out the gate was, "Why are you doing this program? Why do you want to earn a doctorate in professional coaching and human development?" And without missing a beat, my response to him was, I want to be the Michael Jordan of coaching. I had just finished watching The Last Dance, the docuseries about Jordan, his journey, and I was really inspired, by his work ethic his energy, the energy that he brought to his craft. And I wanted to embody, a similar energy with coaching and really set myself on a path of mastery with coaching. And I felt like earning my master's and PhD in coaching would do that, would help me with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I remember when we were talking like last month, maybe earlier this month, I'm not exactly sure, but I remember us having a conversation also about how you, as a result of doing this, you also recognize the sort of the responsibility of modeling what is possible for people. I would say people of color, but even specifically men of color. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think there's I don't I don't think it's a unique experience to go, I'm kind of done with college and I just want to go out and earn money. I think that's really a universal experience most of us
Yeah.
have, like, oh, I've done enough. And yet, like, that moving on to a PhD, a master's and a PhD program, the movement on from I'm an ACC coach to I'm an MCC coach. I mean, there's some real, like, well, Michael Jordan was known for his leaps, right? And
Mhm.
landing the ball in the basket. And so, I mean, it's a beautiful example of that movement of leaping into the space. Really admire that.
Mm.
And how are you seeing the work that you've done show up with the people that you're working with?
Yeah, it's you know my doctoral work and my work towards the MCC was very intertwined and interconnected. Um, and what I what I took the most value from that journey is the embodiment. Like it was like not only embodying, the markers or the competencies of being an MCC, um, but also, you know, treating my PhD and my doctoral work as an embodiment as well. Like it wasn't just about the credential. It wasn't just about having the three letters behind my name. It was, how can I integrate this and show up with my clients, in an even more, powerful and impactful way. So that was my intention and that was my approach as I pursued both simultaneously, which I look back in hindsight now is like, why did I do that to myself?
That was a heavy lift.
Yeah.
And your doctoral work was around working with, and I'm not even going to ask it that way. Let me just start over again. Tell me more about your doctoral work. Like, where was your focus?
Yeah. Well, the unique thing about IUPS, International University of Professional Studies, is it's a very innovative, and again, it was an experiential learning process that was not, because like, IUPS is not an accredited institution and they are intentionally not accredited. They have selected not to apply for accreditation to maintain the integrity of their innovative learning structure. And that's one of the things that really attracted me to this particular school. And so remind me what your question was again.
Well, it's really like, what was your work around? Like, what was your
Oh, yeah.
focus of your doctoral work? Yeah.
Yeah, I got a little sidetracked there.
That's okay. I
Um,
think it's important, though. I think it's great information. And
yeah,
the reasoning behind it, I think, is really important too, because I think sometimes we go, oh, it's not accredited, it isn't a value. But I think there is a sense of, like, it's even in this particular instance, it's a conscious decision. It's of value because of the innovation that it allows. You're not on a specific track that fits within the university budgeting system. It's, you
right,
get to really choose something. So,
right.
what was your work about?
Yeah. And what I just mentioned, like that was I feel that choosing this particular program that had such an innovative structure allowed me to be able to pursue the topic for my dissertation that I really wanted to pursue and that I was really passionate about. And so when I think back to uh, uh, my earlier coach training days, when I was in Ideal Coaching Global, I knew that my platform, so to speak, was going to be around male empowerment and around, the conversation of masculinity and the word that, was wielded around, and it still is, today, not as much, but, toxic masculinity was something that I was really passionate about learning more about and exploring more deeply. Um, and so I knew that going into this doctoral program that I wanted to explore that. And then my mentor really was intentional about helping me get really specific and hone in on, you know, who is this work, who is this research going to impact, or who do you want it to impact the most? And that was kind of a no-brainer for me. It was people who look like me, you know. Um, and so yeah, that was really the catalyst for the work that I did in my with my dissertation. So the title of my dissertation is Secret Vows, Cultic Underpinnings of Performative Masculinity Among Adolescent Black American Christian Males.
And what did you learn from your exploration and research?
Yeah, so much, way more than I can unpack here in this
All
conversation.
right,
But
we'll do the nutshell version, I guess.
yeah, the nutshell version is so I studied a lot of Bell Hooks' work. I'm not sure if you how
Mm,
familiar you are with Bell Hooks, but she's done a lot of work around maleness and masculinity and manhood, and she's written several books about that. Um, and she also integrates race and racial issues and racism in that exploration as well. And so combining the masculinity conversation with cults, because I've always been fascinated by cults and high control groups as well. And I was really curious and interested in exploring the connection, or the link between cults and high control groups and this invention that we created called masculinity.
yeah,
And I call it performative masculinity because I feel like, toxic masculinity just kind of writes it off as bad or wrong.
right.
And I was encouraged by another colleague early on to consider another way to language it. And so I came up with performative masculinity.
I really like it because I agree with you. I think when we use words like toxic, both of them are labels, and yet
Mhm.
one label is more like it's accessible in the sense of, yeah, because we're trained to perform. And so
Yeah.
it makes sense that it would be performative because most of us become successful at whatever it is that we're doing. It doesn't really matter what we're doing. We become successful because we're doing something, right?
Mhm.
And so I like the shift in language there, because toxic, I don't know, I think just it's such a word that just pushes people. It's kind of like, I don't want to be, I'm not, that's not me, I'm doing this
Right.
for a reason, right? And so we
Right.
can other it. And I
Yeah.
love the language shift there. But you said something that I think I didn't catch when you named your dissertation. And I heard the word cult, but I heard it and I didn't understand it in the way that you're using it at, like, I didn't hear it as cult, right? Like I heard it, but I was thinking maybe that's a different way of saying cultural issues, right? But it isn't. It's really around this sort of cult-ish qualities. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Like how you saw that showing up?
Yeah. Well, just thinking about how cults and cult groups and high control groups function and how they're able to function the way they do. It's really about conformity and compliance.
It's the power and control wheel, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so I wanted to explore the connections between, that conformity and compliance to this construct of masculinity that men are often trapped in, you know. Uh, and so what I ultimately learned is that, number one, that's a real thing. And then just kind of tying in all of the other nuances, around race and around, um, uh, uh, you know, being an adolescent, being a boy, and being raised with that patriarchal, Bell Hooks calls it imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy.
Interesting.
And that's what ultimately I learned is the core cultic underpinning of performative masculinity.
And is it, I mean, what's your theories behind why that is? I mean, do you have a theory around why that is? The
Why?
underpinning? Why that becomes the underpinning is it that it's just so engendered within the like structure of sort of European culture, seeing itself as sort of the epoch of like, culture or whatever, and then the spreading of those ideas into the world through
Yeah.
colonialism? Like, I mean, what are you kind of thinking is underpinning that?
Yeah, yeah, no, that is it. And for for Black males, it becomes this survival mechanism where we have to perform a certain way as we move and navigate through the world in order to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Because if if the standard is, you know, white males, if that's the standard of what is good and what is right and what is pure, then we now have to, you know, diminish and devalue ourselves and be inauthentic and put up this facade and this performance in order to simply survive.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's sort of striking me here too is that there's this sort of, and I know that the focus is for you on Black males, but as you're talking, I'm really sort of relating to just the experience of like most people trying to fit within whatever this box is that our culture is deemed is the correct way of being. And if you don't show up within that box, whether you have a different philosophical perspective or a religious perspective, or you're culturally different, or you don't look like everybody else is supposed to look, or you have a different identity of some form, that then we get tried, we have, the only way to succeed is to fit into this box that
Yeah.
is a construct, to your point, of what we're
Mhm.
supposed to be, and that all of us are in many ways diminished as a result of trying to conform to the box.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I sort of lightly uh mentioned this because my focus was on Black males, but one of the things that emerged was the very imperialist white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that underpins performative masculinity also affects white males negatively.
Yes.
Like because it
Yeah,
boxes
and
them,
women, and
women, like it boxes everybody in, you
yeah.
know? Yeah.
No, and I think that is really important too, because it isn't that it is, I mean, I think it, and I'm guessing here, and please feel free to correct me if I'm like wrong. I don't mind being like, please correct me if I'm not hearing you correctly.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really showing up for me is that, it may impact in some way people of color a bit more, because they're really having to step within a system that may not reflect their own lived experience, right? And
Mhm.
yet, I think what is so crucially important here is that all of us are impacted by these constraints and these boxes that are created out of this sort of idealized idea of what the world is supposed to look like from one particular lens.
Right.
And it's interesting. You and I chatted just briefly about this before we started today, but I had taught that an anger management course for the U.S. Air Force for 7 years, and and I brought up Jackson Katz's work on tough guys, GUISE, and this sort of the masks that men are forced in many ways to wear. And one of the things that came up so often in that course or in that group, and honestly, there were people of every color. I had women in that group at times too, but it really was much more of a men's group in the Air Force because there was just more predominantly men getting in trouble for their anger than women. Which is not to say that women were not angry and acting inappropriately, but that's a whole nother topic. But one of the things that was really fascinating was just the way that because of how our cultural norms are, how men would keep, like, the box was created, and then how they would even work against each other to keep them in the box. Like, you're not allowed to step out of this box. You're not
Right.
allowed to be creative. You're not allowed to do that. You have to fit in this box, and all of the negative labeling that was done, and to the self. I don't want to be a this, or I don't want to be a that. I have to be a man, and
Mhm.
the ideas of vulnerability equaling weakness. I mean, we had lots of conversations about, really, is vulnerability weakness or is it courage? Because it
Right.
takes courage to actually show up transparently and honestly and name what you need. But there also has to be somebody who can hear it, right?
Yeah.
And women do their part to keep men in boxes also.
Yeah.
And I throw that out here because I think it is so important that we see that these constructs impact all of us. And I know your work was focused on specifically on Black males and Black youth, and I think it is absolutely a crucially important introspection for our culture to recognize,
Mhm.
and that it isn't only Black men who are impacted by this, but that we all are. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. And that was really my intention. My intention was to, in order to get myself through the process in a timely fashion to focus on one particular group, so that I wouldn't have to do this really broad
Yeah.
research and exploration. Um, but where was I going? This is such a rich. Oh yeah. So one of the things that you kind of touched on is, and that emerged in my studies and my research, is the idea that um, that masculinity and that performative nature is rooted in this idea that uh, the opposite is weakness, and the opposite being feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the negative connotations that come up, or the negative, language that we use, or language that we use that is perceived as negative, tends to fall more on the feminine side. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I then began to explore, well, why is it that anything that's considered feminine is considered weak? And again, it just ties right back to that patriarchal
Mm-hmm.
construct
Yeah.
that men are strong, women are weak, emotions are weak because women,
Are emotional.
well, you're right. Well, the myth is that women are more emotional than men, and it's like, no, I would say men are probably more emotional than women. It's just that women historically in society are allowed to be more emotionally expressive than men.
I
So
think
it,
they're also, oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry, I'm interrupting you. You finish your sentence.
Yeah. I was finished. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, just piggybacking on what you're sharing there, I think, one of the things that I would talk in this anger management group about is that I felt, and I mean, I'm married to a man, and he is very, I mean, he was in the military, so he's kind of got this like tough guys thing going on himself. But I mean, all the emotions, I've always seen men having all the same emotions as women, but the access to be able to communicate those emotions is what we do not teach men. It's like
Hmm.
they have the feelings, but they come out as like, it's either like it's funny or I'm angry. Like we give you a couple of emotions that are like acceptable, but you
Yeah.
can be introspective also, but only to a degree, at which point then you're, to your point, tripping into the territory of, you know, femininity, you're being too vulnerable, you're being too emotional, you're being too whatever that, and
Mhm.
then that, like, who wants to be that?
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and you and I were sharing a laugh about this kind of idea also of how we use feminine language as though women are this sort of weakness or this thing that doesn't have any I don't know. I don't know that we use the exploration in this way, but this idea of women as weaker and talking about, like what part of your body would you like to press a baby out of? Like women are quite capable and quite strong and quite physically resilient and emotionally resilient and
Yeah.
capable of so many different things. I think it was Maya Angelou, but I'm not absolutely 100% positive about this. But there was some work that I had read around like what is diminished in the person's ability to show up creatively, to the person's ability to add to the world in ways that are positive if they're shut down and kept quiet and kept silent
Hmm.
and dismissed. And I think some of what's showing up for me as you're talking is this idea of, I think a lot of people being dismissed unless they're like Michael Jordan. I mean, he's so amazing that of course, he's not dismissed, but there's so many other people out there that are brilliant also. And how do we dismiss them? Maybe not intentionally, but it happens, and that their offering and their brilliance that they have for the world is lost as a result of it because they're never encouraged to share it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's coming up for you as we're talking about this, but I think it's important too in my mind.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah, historically, men are not allowed to explore um the the deeper, more emotional feelings. Like we're taught from a very early age to basically betray our own bodies and to betray our own hearts. And one of the things that emerged for me, because part of my research was heuristic inquiry. So I really wanted to dig more deeply into myself as part of the process as well. Um, and one of the things that emerged for me was this realization that, because remember I said when I was in school, coaching school, um, I knew that my platform was going to be, around male empowerment and this idea of, head to heart bifurcation among men. What emerged for me through, my deep inner work journey is that I was disconnected and bifurcated head to heart as well. But it showed up in unique ways. So I then had to do my own work, with, connecting. And I specifically hired a female coach, and she really helped me to learn how to listen to my heart and to trust my heart and allow my heart to lead me more so than this, because this can be kind of chaotic at times. And that was a game changer for me, or as I like to say, a player changer. Like the game doesn't always change, but the player does.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, player changer.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, just allowing myself the space and the freedom to express whatever emotion I'm feeling authentically without judgment, without beating myself up for it, just offering myself some grace and compassion in that process. And like I said, allowing in everything that I do in my work, in my personal relationships, allowing myself to lead with my heart and trusting that when I do lead with my heart, that's always going to be enough to fill the space.
Well, and you're working with, you know, high achieving men in your practice.
Mhm.
How do you see, because that bifurcation, I think is so important to explore. And I love that you worked with a female coach to like, because women get that opportunity to play with that
Yeah.
through their entire lives, really. And so I think that's really cool that you did that. How do you see it playing out with the men that you're working with, and how do you support them in that journey to recognize the head heart connectedness?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Another one of my coaches, you may be familiar with him, Rich Litvin, uh, who wrote The Prosperous Coach. He says this all the time. He says, you can only take your clients as deeply as you've gone yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have done the work and I'm, it's an ongoing process, an ongoing journey, continuing to do the work, I think a big part of it is demonstrating and being an example for my clients and sharing with them my own experiences and my own, personal stories and narratives, um, and things that I've overcome, challenges that I've overcome in that space. I found to be really, really impactful. Um, and also, like I have one client in particular that when we first began our journey a couple of years ago, one of the first things that he said out the gate was, uh, feelings don't get shit done.
Which is a really strong mindset.
Right, right. And I think even today, a couple of years later, there's still an element of that shows up for him. But what emerged through our journey is him having that space to allow his feelings and emotions to be in the space without feeling judged. He even said that to me a couple of days ago. He thanked me and acknowledged me for creating this container and this space for him to be able to share authentically and vulnerably without fear of being judged or being criticized
In some
or
way.
shamed. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, it's sort of interesting too, because I think about emotions as sort of they're like road signs. Like, I mean, really, if you were driving down the road, which of those road signs on the road would you prefer not to see? I mean, yeah, we maybe don't agree with the speed limit or whatever, but knowing that there's curves ahead is not a bad thing to know. Like, I mean, if there were no road signs on the roads and you're just moving through the world, there's nothing to help to support you to be like aware of whatever's coming up, like
right.
no traffic lights. And I think this kind of idea that emotions don't get shit done, well, maybe the emotions don't get shit done, but they sure stop shit from getting done also, because if
Yeah,
you're not aware of them and you're not curious, like, why am I even feeling this way, how do you then get through all those underlying things that are stopping you from taking the actions that are needed in order to get shit done, right? Like,
right.
all that stuff below the waterline is in, it doesn't just go away because you don't acknowledge it. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like, I'm going to just cut off. It's kind of the Monty Python skit, right? Like, I can take you with one arm tied behind my back, right? Like, I don't need an arm, I'll kick you or whatever. It's like we're removing parts of ourselves that give us access to information that supports us to do what it is that we need to be doing in the world. And
Yeah.
I love that you're creating that space for people to explore that.
Mhm.
And for your and the other thing that you mentioned that I think is so crucial is the self-worth, that that idea. And I mean, it's been sort of a theme throughout this podcast. I've heard, this is a common theme of we cannot take others where we have not gone ourselves, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you haven't walked through your own box
Yeah.
and explored it fully, pulled out the paper, like opened it up, decided maybe I'm going to break it down and turn it into compost.
Mhm.
How do you support somebody else to go through the work? And I'm wondering, I know as you're going through the heavy lift of the PhD and your MCC at the same time, I mean, I know the MCC journey is really that exploration into ourselves and how we're being with other people so that we can be in partnership with them. How did that process also impact the work that you're doing?
Mm. Um, I mean, doing the MCC work, and I had an amazing mentor, Like I knew she was my mentor. She was like the senior mentor of the School of Ideal Coaching Global at the time that I went through the course. And I knew that when I was ready to pursue my MCC, that uh, she was going to be my mentor coach. And yeah, like it was a deeper awareness of myself, um, in order to embody, the markers of MCC. It had me to really, again, without being, hypercritical or judgmental, just really making assessments and then making adjustments based on those assessments. Um, and it shifted how I show up with my clients. It shifted what I am present to as I'm serving my clients. So that was like the big thing was it was a deeper self-awareness, and there was also an intention, uh, to, I get to embody these things. Um, and just to, kind of tie the worthiness part back in, you know, one of my, I guess, core values or virtues is dignity. And I describe dignity as my sense of worthiness, right? Um, and my sense of worthiness is my sense of I am enough, and my humanness is enough, that I am sufficient, who I am and where I am right now in this moment. And I get to improve because I am worthy of improvement and because I choose to improve. So
Beautiful.
it's not about coming from a deficit.
There's something wrong with me. I need to
There's
change.
something wrong with me. I need to change. I need to fix
Yeah,
myself. I'm not broken.
right.
I'm not broken.
What a different mind shift, right? And a mindset of, I love that. I'm mindset of I'm not broken. I'm worthy of improvement,
Yes. Yes.
of
And
growth.
I choose it. Yeah. I
Yeah.
choose it. That's where the agency comes in. I have the dignity of my choice to improve because I'm worthy of improvement and because I want to and I choose to. It's a desire, to be the highest, grandest expression of myself as a human in the world.
I want to just sit with that for a second because I think that is such a powerful way of shifting that internal narrative, right?
Mhm.
And I think, going back to the box that we all get kind of put into,
Yeah.
I think it is a lot. I think a lot of that negative narrative of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm a imposter syndrome, whatever it is that you want to
Mhm.
call it, right?
Mhm.
That comes out of the fact that we're trying to find alignment with something that we're not aligned with, and we always feel off as a result of it, and it just doesn't fit right. And then the required courage is that self exploration so that we can emerge, I guess, a bit like the from the chrysalis of that box,
Mhm.
into something that is actually a reasonable representation of who we're working to grow into.
Mhm.
And I just think that's such a powerful reminder for people.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, it's really such a powerful reminder that we get to choose this work because it serves us, and we get to choose the exploration and the opportunities for growth because it's our choice. We have the agency, and we're worthy of the work.
Yes. Yes.
I love
Absolutely.
that, Freddie. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, I love that, Freddie. Wow. And so then, I mean, I also think I have a question then around what's the work then for coaches when they're working with anybody? I mean, whoever their people are that they're working with, what do you offer coaches to consider to support this deeper work of empowering clients to their own self-worth, really?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, first, I would say, based on my experience and my journey, go inward first. You know, I get to do my work first and in tandem with the rest of the work that I'm doing. Um, but it begins with self. I always draw this distinction with many of my clients, the distinction of um, being nice versus being kind.
What's the distinction for you?
So nice things are nice. People are kind. Nice is it's a facade. It's a performance. It's an affectation.
Mhm.
Um, nice says, I don't want you to see who I really am authentically because who I really am authentically is not enough. So I'm going to show you a I'm going to put on the mask, because all performances begin with the mask. I'm going to put on the mask and give this performance because I want you to think I'm a nice person.
I want you to
I'm a
like
nice
me.
person.
Yeah.
Right. Which diminishes my own dignity and my sense of worthiness, you know.
And to some degree, at some point, because of the socialization, we're doing this to ourselves. I mean, we're the
Yeah,
ones keeping ourselves in the box,
exactly.
which is then where the agency comes in when we choose, I no longer, kind of from the matrix, there is no spoon, right? There is no box. If you choose to have
Exactly.
no box.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So like I said, nice is, it's an affectation that diminishes our sense of worthiness, whereas kindness is a virtue. It's a way of being. Um, yeah, it's a way of being. And it begins with self. It begins with self first, and we share that kindness with others. If we're not kind to ourselves, but we're always, being kind to others or being nice to others at our own expense, that's not authentic.
It's not healthy or sustainable. I mean, maybe it's sustainable, but at great cost,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, I really appreciate it. And I love the bringing of the values. And I mean, I'm going to go back to my anger management group just because it's in my mind right now. But one of the things that we would talk about are like the values that we all sort of shared. And one of them was things like respect. Respect is one of those values that people often hold as a value that I think is an important value, the value of respect. But as you started talking to people, like, what does it mean? It often meant that you're giving me respect versus the place where I actually have control, which is me giving you respect. And
Mhm.
so again, when you're thinking of, for me in this group, we would talk about locus of control, and like, I don't have control over making you respect me. Like that is not within my sphere. I can maybe influence it, but it's not within my sphere of control. But how do I live what I say my values are? So if the value is kindness, if the value is respect, if the value is honesty, like whatever the value is, how do I demonstrate it? And I don't worry about your demonstration of it. I worry instead about my own, where I actually have control to do something different. That's
Mhm.
that's what's showing up as you're talking about this idea of
Mhm.
niceness versus kindness. Because I do believe that's the difference, right? One is a facade and the other is a value,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
demonstrable one. It
A
has
demonstratable and an embodied. It's an
an
embodiment.
embodied.
Yeah.
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 One of the things that came up earlier in our conversation, and I'm kind of circling back to it because it popped up in my head. I was having a conversation with one of my clients who's male, and that bifurcation of head and heart. And I think this really speaks to the kindness element also, because we have to be connected to our heart in order to be kind. But one of the funny conversations, and I wasn't thinking of that bifurcation until you brought it up, and now I'm thinking about it a lot all of a sudden. But by the end of the conversation, he was saying, I need to feel with my head and think with my heart. So he had sort of taken the bifurcation and twisted it so that it wasn't all just a talking head, but rather was bringing the like making decisions maybe more from a heart space and feeling into it with his head, like using his head and his heart together in new ways. And I don't know why I'm sharing that right at this moment, but I just think it fits with just how we can start to conceptualize these ideas in new and unique ways.
Mm-hmm.
And use our whole self as we're making decisions or how we're showing up in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love
It
that.
was so much fun also, I have to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Having a really good time with that conversation.
Yeah.
When you think of people who have really influenced you or books that you read that really impacted you in your journey, is there anything that you would share with the listeners that you would recommend to them to maybe take a look at or think about or play with?
Yeah. Oh man. I have such a long list of recommended books. But I would say one of the most impactful book series and authors that has completely just transformed my worldview, really, about a lot of things, is Neil Donald Walsh and his Conversations with God series. That just completely blew me out of the water. It just blew me away because I grew up in a very, strong religious background, and reading his work just completely shifted and transformed how I view God. It was so distinct and different from how I was indoctrinated. And when I read his work, there was a feeling that I felt, and I believe I felt it in my heart, where I was like, yes, this feels right. You know, this feels not even right. I always say it's much more powerful to be loving than to be right.
Mm.
But listening to, because I do audiobooks. I prefer
Me too.
audiobooks.
I'm a big audio
And
person.
the cool thing about the Conversations with God audiobooks is so Neil Donald Walsh, because have you read the series?
No, but I'm really interested now that you're bringing it up.
Yeah. So with the audio version, because the way the book was written, it's an actual conversation that he's having with God. And so he narrates as himself, as his own voice. And then he hired two other narrators to do the voice of God. And one is a male, one is a female, and he just randomly fluctuates between the two. It's so cool.
I love that. And I
Yeah.
love also that sort of the bringing together of the yin and the yang and the masculine and the feminine, and the recognition of both are valuable.
Yeah. And this is something that came up in my work, my doctoral work, is that it's not either or, it's not black and white, it's a spectrum, you know, like there, I consider myself to be, a masculine guy, but, or and,
Yes, and
and yes, and yeah, exactly. And there are elements of femininity that come in that make me just as, if not more strong as a man
Mhm.
than if I didn't practice those, you know, those virtues. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have so much enjoyed spending time with you today, Freddie. Oh my gosh.
Same here. Same here.
I
Beautiful
think,
conversation.
oh my gosh, I've really had fun with it. And I just want to just say thank you so much for sharing your learning the work that you've done, I think, is so valuable and important, and really cross-cultural. I mean, I think it just really impacts everybody. And so I just think
Mhm.
it's so crucial for people to even know about it, right? And
Yeah.
then also just for the delight of who you are as a human being. Thank you so much for being on the coaching studio.